You're listening to Recovery Survey, the podcast that shatters stigmas around different types of addictions and takes a deep dive into spiritual principles.
At 17, I wound up getting pregnant and having my daughter. Becoming a mother wasn't sufficient enough of a reason to stop drinking, to stop partying, to stop seeking out how to self-medicate.
My guest today is named Andy Hoffer. She is a former nuclear engineer. She currently runs her own fitness and coaching business, and she's an amateur bodybuilder. Welcome to the show, Andy. Well, Andy, I'd love to jump right in. Maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about your childhood and kind of how the whole addiction began.
So I grew up in a culture where it's pretty normal to have children try just a little bit of alcohol. That's kind of the norm, just a little bit, just to have them make a face. But, when I was very young, I knew that I loved it. Like, I absolutely took to it. I was one of those people that I really idolized what being drunk meant. And, I saw the family parties and, what that came along with. And there's always a party in my family. We're Hispanic, so we have a huge family. So there's always a reason to celebrate. And so I grew up seeing that alcohol was a part of family life. It was a part of just the culture in general. So, I always joke about how, when I was little, that they would give me like a little cap full of vodka and I loved it. And, my dad would be like, oh, we're not going to give you any more. Like, get out of here. Like, we'll give you some later. And of course, later came and I'd be like, hey, Dad, where's my vodka? And, this is like 8 or 9 years old that I'm still asking for alcohol, which could be an indicator or could just be, just what kids do, right? So because I saw, the festivities and how, drinking meant to get drunk, that was kind of the measuring stick that I had my whole life was, when I drink, I'm going to get drunk. When other people drink, they are going to get drunk. There is no sort of in between. Like, if you only did one drink, there was something wrong with you. Like, you couldn't hang, like you were a square, like you were not somebody that I could be around. And that was just how I lived. I surrounded myself with other alcoholics or people who drank to excess. And so I normalized my behavior by doing that. And, that went on, and I had jackpot after jackpot after jackpot. And as I had mentioned before, at 17, I wound up getting pregnant and having my daughter. And it wasn't even like, thank God I never drank while I was pregnant, but becoming a mother wasn't sufficient enough of a reason to stop drinking, to stop partying, to stop seeking out how to self-medicate. A big part of my story is this idea that like I was a shitty mom. Like, people would be like, oh no, Andy, you were right. No, I, did stuff to my daughter. I was violent with her. I was angry. I was neglectful. I did the things to, sort of create an environment of chaos for her. And, I often would leave her at my mother's and just go drink. I was very irresponsible. And so I own that today. And just moving sort of forward in time, like I really didn't have a relationship with her. I was doing quote unquote all the right things. I was going to school, I had a job, but I really couldn't hang on to any relationships with family, friends, partners. Like people were just like water in my hand. Like, I could not keep people in my life. And there was always some drama happening. It was always like, things will get better once I get my shit together. Once this next thing gets fixed. Like things will sort themselves out. Like I'll be fine after that. I'll be fine. So deep down somewhere, I like always knew that there was something fundamentally wrong with how I was living. I just didn't know what it was. And, I was one of those drunk people that like, I could not just have one. As I mentioned before, like I assumed that people who only had one were, there was something wrong with them. But I wanted to, be the life of the party. I wanted to have fun. And so, we could be going to a communion and I would be pre-gaming. Like it just the insanity of it was like, just crazy. So by the end of my drinking back in 2014, I was, drinking every day. Life wasn't a party. I was going to work, coming home and, just cracking open beer, wine, whatever I had in the fridge. And, oh, it's Tuesday, like, yay. And, I'd been through multiple relationships. I'd been through multiple, just friends, family, roommates, everything. Just, it was never like, I couldn't get it together. At that time I had been seeing somebody and they were on the precipice of leaving me. And I'm like, oh, well, you can't leave me right now because I'm going to start going to therapy. And they were like, okay, fine. So I started going to therapy as like a way to keep somebody in my life. And, I'm still half-assing it. Like I'm not really taking it seriously, but, what wound up happening was, they still realized that I wasn't trying to change. So they, threatened to leave me again. And I'm like, no, you can't leave me because I'm going to stop drinking. Like I just blurted that out. Like, I don't know where it came from. And they were like, oh, okay. But I still wasn't ready to stop drinking. Then it became the bargaining, I'll only do it on weekends. I'll only do it at parties, at birthdays. Like it'll be rare. I'll only do beer, not alcohol. I'll drink one drink and then one water, like all the crazy ways to try to manage it. Like it was just not like, I'll just stop. It was like, I'm trying to negotiate my way to stay drinking. So once all of that, didn't work out, I remember I had organized a function for my job at the time. And, it was one of those, like, where you go to the bar and you paint something and like you're drinking. I wasn't particularly drunk. I wasn't particularly out of my mind. Like nobody really noticed, but that had crossed the line to get drunk at a work function. And so I'm walking home and I had my moment where I was like, oh, maybe I can't control this. I mean, let alone the jackpots, let alone the drunk driving, the self-abuse, let alone the, waking up with random people, let alone throwing up and the peeing on myself, like let alone all of those horrific things that happened to me. But getting, a little tipsy at a work function, that was the line. That was where I was like, oh, okay, this is a problem. This is where I've got a problem. So I wind up deciding, I'm just not going to drink. That's easy. So I stopped drinking. And for 10 months, my program was avoidance and isolation. I knew I couldn't see friends because I would drink. I knew I couldn't hang out with family because I would drink. I didn't have a relationship with my daughter really. So, every day I would go to work, come home, give her my credit card to go order herself some food. And by this time she's like 14 years old. So of course she's eating like pizza every day. And, she, I just go in my room, shut the door, and I just cry myself to sleep. So I spent 10 months like that, 10 months locked in my room because I knew I could not leave the room in safety. Oh, I hadn't planned to cry. But, by the end of those 10 months, I called my cousin and I said, I think I have like this weird disease where I need to drink to be happy. Like, I don't know what to do. And she's like, well, this is kind of above my pay grade, so maybe you should tell your therapist. And I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So the next day I talked to my therapist and they're like, well, there's meetings for that. And I'm like, no, not an alcoholic. I just have to drink. Like, don't you see my resume? Don't you see, like, I own homes, like the cars, like I can get friends if I want. I just can't keep them. Like I've got money. I've got everything. Like I'm well dressed. I'm not that. That's not me. And he was like, okay. And I said, but you know what? Just to prove that I'm not, as like a last ditch effort, I'm going to go to a meeting. That's it. I'm going to go to a meeting just to prove you wrong. So it took me about a week. I found one that was down the street from my job. Lunchtime meeting, was not inconvenienced by it whatsoever. It fit into my schedule. And so I show up to this meeting and I sit in the back in the corner, clutching my purse. And this is at, a university. So everybody there's like an academic. And I'm like afraid people are going to steal my little purse here. And I'm totally judging everybody who's coming in that like, I'm not one of you. I'm not one of you. I'm not one of you. And the man who spoke that day, he couldn't have been further from the opposite of who I am. He's like this older white gentleman who was a philosopher. And, when he started speaking, he started telling my story. He started talking about the way I felt, the things that I had trapped in my head. He was saying them out loud. And I was just like, okay, this is where I need to be. And I raised my hand and I said, I'm Andy and I'm an alcoholic. And from there, my program just took off. I, decided if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get all the help that I can. I started working with a sponsor. I did the 12 steps and then I started sponsoring women. I show up to meetings. I reach out to other alcoholics. I read the literature. I do writing. I do prayer and meditation. Like I threw myself into this program because I knew that if there was anything that I needed to do for myself, it was this. And the way that I knew that the program was working was, one day when, my daughter, she's in high school and, she's going to school and I'd never made her a lunch, in all her entire school years. And I remember, I asked her, I'm like, hey, can I make you a lunch? She's like, yeah, sure. So I made her a lunch for like a week. And then one day she came to me and she said, hey, can you make me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And I'm like, uh-huh. So she leaves the room and I'm like making this peanut butter and jelly sandwich and I just start bawling my eyes out and she comes running back in the room and she's like, why are you crying? And I was just like, because I just love you so much. And I get to make you this peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And she turns around, she's like, you're so weird. And she walked out. And at that moment, I knew I would rather be the weird mom than be the drunk mom. That was the first time that she ever asked me for anything, was this stupid peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I will never forget that moment because to me, it indicated that my life was healing, that something had happened, something had shifted. And that right there, the pure moment of her asking me for something, relying on me for something so small was like, yeah, that happened. And so that's what my program sort of looks like now. I still work with women. I still have my sponsor. My sponsor has a sponsor. More recently, I want to say, 5 years ago, I had started doing yoga and sort of integrated a spiritual practice through yoga. And last year, because of COVID, I had the opportunity to take a I was invited to leave my company as sort of a voluntary layoff. And so I took the opportunity so I could go back to school, because I really find it empowering to be able to help people with movement and physical aspects of their life. Because to me, if you're trapped in sort of this body that you can't, that's with pain and suffering, like especially if you're in an accident, you can't really be connected with a higher source. And so to me, it's just been kind of pulling me in that direction. I became a personal trainer over a year ago. I've been running my own company, like working with people to get them stronger, to get them more flexible, to recover from sort of what their body has kind of imprisoned them to do. And I guess I'll just finish with this, is that, like, the way that I knew that this was my calling was I had a student who, she's 75 years old, and at the end of class, she came up to me and said, Andy, I want to say thank you, because she had gone to camp with her family, and this was the first time in 25 years that she'd pitched her own tent. She had never been able to get up and stand up and go down and up and down trying to pitch a tent, because she didn't have the strength anymore. She wasn't able to move because she'd always just been kind of trapped in her body. And so that to me reflected, the program outside of the yoga and everything. It was like, if I can help free people from, this prison of their mind with, alcoholism, and sponsoring them, I can also free them from the prison of their bodies in the physical world too. So, and I think those two things kind of just go hand in hand. So that's where I'm at right now. That's my life in a nutshell.
That's incredible. And I was curious, as you were talking about the yoga, do you offer any kind of program for people that are in recovery and have something where you kind of take elements of a recovery program and mix it in there with the yoga, or is the yoga specifically just for people to help them with the physical aspects, like you mentioned about like strength training and mobility?
So the yoga in and of itself, the type of yoga that I teach is called Ashtanga yoga, it's an 8-limbed path that has different aspects of it, which is the physical part. It is the connection to your spirit. It's more than just it's gratitude. It's all these teachings that sort of are combined, especially when you're talking to people about their movement patterns and how their thought processes kind of evolve as they come into the practice itself, because it's a pretty challenging practice. And through that, the teachings of yoga align actually pretty well with program. It's this negative self-talk that you're trying to get rid of. It's this idea that, there's something greater than yourself, that it's something that, a connection to a higher source, to a higher power, to whatever you want to call it, if it's God or whatever, that it's beyond this. But, when people think of yoga, they just think of the poses and the exercise and everything. But as you're learning it, those sort of teachings integrate into that. I mean, if you get a good teacher anyways, like they will integrate the way these sort of teachings into the way that they teach it, because that's the root foundation of yoga, is this sort of lifestyle principles that come with it too. So, for me, that's the language that I use. And I tend to integrate a lot of program stuff because, that's where I found healing is, all these program discussions, topics, things that like I related to. So those are the things that I speak to in my classes.
Oh, very cool. I had a guest on a while back, man. It's probably a year or so ago, maybe longer. The way time flies, it's hard to remember. A guy named Aaron Paregis, and he does a recovery yoga program, and he takes like a little section out of the big book or the daily reflection, and he mixes that in with his teaching. So I guess I haven't attended any of his classes, unfortunately, but I think he's doing some virtual ones. But he takes a little section, and then that's part of like the meditation process as you're doing the yoga, is like reflecting on that little section. And I thought that was a really awesome concept.
Yeah. I really appreciate teachers who tie it in one-to-one. I know that there's a teacher out here named Tim Kelleher who used to run a recovering yogi series out here that, was like first we'd have the yoga practice and, really tie in aspects of the big book also, but then also we would sit around kind of like in an informal, unsanctioned kind of nebulous anonymous meeting where, you just talk about the things that were said in class, if anything got brought up, and, just having that sort of balance between practice and discussion afterwards. So like the way that people like really identify with the two is just so special. It's something that is just so powerful too.
Awesome. Well, if you'd like, I'd love to give you the opportunity to tell the listeners how they can get in contact with you. Maybe you can expand a little bit on the services you offer, whether that's in person or virtual. Just what's the best way to find you and get in contact with you?
So I am on Instagram at Hoffer Coaching. Hoffer Coaching. That's me. My website is Andy Hoffer Coaching. My Facebook is also Andy Hoffer Coaching. But just shoot me a DM on Instagram. Like that's where usually I'm kind of just spreading the word about, my trials and tribulations and sort of things that I've overcome. If you're more interested in my story, I share a lot of myself on there, especially as it comes to recovery. I am a personal trainer. I am also a yoga teacher, and I do amateur bodybuilding. But really, my main focus on my business page is, I do fitness, nutrition, and mindset program. And the mindset part of it really ties in a lot of program stuff to it. It's a lot of things, try to get you out of your body to try to just serve a higher purpose. And, we tackle that through fitness and nutrition to start, and then the mindset kind of component comes in. So if you find me, I'll be there.
Awesome. And I will be sure to have the links for all those different accounts in your website in the show notes. So if anybody is interested, they can scroll down in the app or on the website that they're listening to and just click on those links to connect with you. Andy, thank you for coming on the show today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your journey and letting the listeners know the different services that you offer, and just giving us that message of hope and letting us know that there is a way to stop drinking, to find a new way of life, to find that fulfillment. Like you were talking about, if you're in that place where you feel like the only thing that makes you happy or the only thing that brings you happiness is that drink, then it might be a good idea to maybe stop into a 12-step program and see if you identify or reach out to one of us on social media, or, just continue listening to the podcast, and maybe you'll hear somebody that shares something like Andy was talking about, hearing someone else share your story. So thank you for coming on today. I really do appreciate it.
And thank you for your service today. I really appreciate that you have a recovery podcast that I think a lot of people can connect with hearing other people's stories. And so this is such a gift to the world. Thank you so much.
Oh, I appreciate the kind words. Thank you. Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you reinforcing that point that material things don't bring us happiness. Guys, I would encourage you to check out the links in the show notes to find out more about Andy.
You've been listening to Recovery Survey. If you got anything out of today's episode, I'd ask you to please leave us a 5-star review and share this episode with a friend. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can find us at recoverysurvey.com. You can listen to all of our episodes on the website, as well as connect with us on social media, where you can get previews for upcoming episodes.